Hello, hello. Hello, I'm so glad to be up here. Hooray! This has been a long day, and I have been really inspired and glad to be here. How many of you were here for my colleague Rachel this morning? Great. So I am really, I may disappoint you after seeing Rachel. I don't have her presence in the room, but my job here today is to make as transparent as possible all of the things you might be wondering about money before, during, and after law school. And I will do my darndest to give you as full a picture as I can, and then to finish on time so you can kind of, there's so much going on. I wanted to get you through all the information that's here and able to absorb it. If you do nothing else, take one of our pens. You've seen lots of them. They're good pens. And if you don't remember anything I've said, on the pen is our website. And if you go to accesslex.org/online events, we do the Financing Your Legal Education as an online presentation a couple of times a month. So anything you don't catch tonight, you will be able to redo. It is often me, sometimes other colleagues who are doing it, and although it's a webinar and those are sort of boring, we are really interactive. There's a real human every time, and we want to answer your questions. So just so you know, you don't have to catch all of this tonight. The other thing on this pen is Access Connects. That is a helpline where you can get money, financial aid, sort of financial preparedness help from an accredited financial counselor. We're impartial. We will not tell you what to do, but we're like a good friend who likes math to help you think through your scenarios so you're as financially ready for law school as you are academically ready and personally ready. Okay? So that's our goal today, and I'm delighted to be here. So, that works, great. So you already know, Rachel told you about this organization, AccessLex, who many of you have never heard of before. The reason we come to these events is we want people to have heard of us. We care about three things. We're all about legal education. We care about access to legal education, who goes to law school, and it won't surprise you to know that traditionally it's been rich people, white people, and people whose parents have college and higher ed degrees, right? We think we want to broaden that population because it's better for our world. Then there's affordability. How much does law school cost? How much debt do people have on the other side, right? And what are the things that can impact that in such a way that it's a better world? We want lawyers who can focus on justice and not be worried about money. And so we do things that are aimed at that. And then the third is value of legal education. And for a while I was like, value, affordability, aren't they the same thing? What we mean by value is however much you pay for your law degree, are you glad you did it when you come to the other side? Do you pass the bar? Do you get a job as an attorney? Are you getting what you paid for, right? So some of that is like satisfaction and how to make it the experience that is worth the money that you're paying for, whatever price tag that is. Does that make sense? So we do that in a couple ways. There's Rachel's team that's sort of like a policy think tank. It's all sort of studying things and publishing things and advocating for people to, based on the data that we collect, to do different things. And there's a financial education team. We go around, we are at 140 law school campuses teaching law students about money. All the basic money stuff that we all need to know, but no one ever teaches us. We are teaching law students. We built a curriculum based on the things law students told us they were worried about, they were anxious about, they wanted help with. And we're delivering that online and live in workshops and through one-on-one personal coaching with accredited financial counselors. That's really cool. I'm proud of that. And through those programs, I've been on law school campuses counseling 3Ls as they are graduating and going, all right, now I have to think about my debt. Ugh. And we've had some real honest conversations. A lot of them said, whatever their experience is, they said, I wish I'd thought a little more about the money side before, right? Because it's great that we're helping law students manage their money, but by the time you're in law school, you've signed some pretty big documents taking on some pretty big financial burdens. And my goal is to help you feel as prepared and confident as you can about what you've undertaken and why, so you know that you're making great decisions, right? And so we'll dive into that today. Whatever I don't get to, I want to make this interactive, but some of the interactivity has slowed us down, so I'm going to kind of push through that and then save your questions to the end. And anything I don't get to right here in the room, I will go out there and we can talk some more and try to answer your personal questions. And you have access on your phone, on your little pen, or here, some handouts. Access Connects gives you the chance to really dive into your own personal financial situation in a more leisurely way, not right here in the middle of this. Okay, so the other thing I want to say is about me, right? Anytime anyone talks to you, especially about money, right? Especially a white lady about money, right? Like, you might want to know, like, who's this person and how much should I trust what she has to say? So AccessLex, I've told you what AccessLex is all about. I am an attorney. When I practiced, I was a bankruptcy attorney. I care about debt and about what burdens debt, has on people and how to get people out of that kind of trouble. It's very interesting and important. I am married to a criminal defense attorney. We have our JDs and we are proud of our JDs. I am still paying for my law degree. Yeah, I'm sorry to say that, but it is true. But I'm glad about it. The more I get in front of people and say I'm still paying for it, the madder I am about it, the harder I'm chasing it. What else did I want to say? Oh, I was a pre-law advisor for 9 years. So I thank those of you who let me remind myself about how fun it is to help people sort of making decisions about law school with their own trajectory. And so, although Rachel is sort of leading that charge for us, I'm a secondary person on your team as a pre-law advisor, thinking about how to help you make your own decisions. Okay, now you know how to weigh what I'm saying to you. And my name is Sherry Mason. I didn't say that, did I? So you're on a journey, and I'm a believer in the law degree, right? But I think it's a considerable investment, and so I guess I don't want you to think that that if I'm giving you sobering information now, that I'm trying to discourage you from the path ahead. So at AccessLex, when we think about the money side, we think of it as a kind of a 5-year thing, right? There's 5 years of money worth. Any of you who are now in the application process, you know that the year before you go to law school is an expensive year. There is no financial aid available for these costs in the application side. It's not sort of the traditional financial aid office help that you can get. So we'll talk through some of those costs and the best strategies we know about for making sense of those. Then there's the costs of law school. That's pretty traditional. And we'll talk about what those numbers might mean and what things have an influence over what those costs are. And then there's after law school, and a lot of people don't think about the costs of getting from walking across the stage and getting your law degree to getting your first paycheck as an attorney, right? And so we'll talk through that gap sometimes, and even what to expect in the different kinds of arenas where you might be collecting a paycheck. So we think there are some strategic decisions, right? We want to give you as much information as you can so you can make a plan that's strategic and you're not paying more than you need to and you're getting value for the money that you do spend. So let's talk about the pre-law costs. So this will probably be familiar to you if you are in the application process. If it is still a ways ahead, I want to suggest that you do some planning for this, right? So you're going to have to register for your standardized test. We'll be talking about the LSAT because LSAT is right now the universally accepted test. The GRE LSAT decision is one. Actually, I think the next session will help you, give you some clarity about how you want to do that. But they're equivalently priced. And then preparing for the LSAT can be quite expensive. If you didn't get one of the handouts in Rachel's presentation this morning, her team has prepared a list of LSAT prep courses and ones that offer discounts. So, it's one of those dollar signs, $1 to $4 signs, how expensive it is, and whether there are discounts available. Then there are application expenses, right? Each law school may charge you an application fee. And then there's the credential assembly service. That's what LSAC, the Law School Admissions Council, has you use, where all of your letters of recommendation are gathered together, where you'll upload your essays to. You have to pay to subscribe to that thing. And then every time they transmit your information to a law school, they charge you money for it, right? This is maddening and expensive, and what you need to do is plan for it. And then when it's time, when you're admitted to law school and you decide where you're going to go, the law school says, great, I hope you're coming. Send in a deposit, right, to reserve your spot. So that's a big hunk of money, and that's going to come in the springtime, and you'll want to be planning for that, right? The deposit with the school may be the one that you can negotiate or have a conversation about. It can be covered with your financial aid package. Everything else, you got to come up with this money before you're getting financial aid, right? So you want to be thoughtful about this. What are the possible strategies you could be using for this, right? Well, it is worth applying. If you have financial need, apply for a fee waiver from the Law School Admissions Council, right? I encourage you to plan way ahead. They are slow to respond. They are a little bit severe in what kind of documentation and what kind of real severe financial need you may have before they grant fee waivers. Here is what I have heard, and I would love, more current information, because this, as well informed as I am from gossip, then the better I can do spreading information, and I'm hopeful it will be true. I have been told that LSAC is not generous about giving fee waivers, but they may be more generous about appeals. So if your fee waiver is denied, you may have more luck appealing your fee waiver, right? That may not be, because probably a lot of people give up at that first denial, and so you appeal, and there are fewer, and maybe they're a little more inclined to help you out. If you can get a fee waiver, it's worth a lot, right? It's registration for your LSAT, and you get 2 tests, whether you should take it twice or not, or only take it once. This is a strategy conversation, but you get 2 cracks at it. Free credential assembly service, and 3 free school reports. So that's a substantial value. I would say it's worth a try, but leave time, right? That can't, you can't be scrambling for this, because you may want to leave room for that denial and then that appeal before you plan to use it. That's what I know. You probably also have heard of the Khan Academy. Yeses, yeah. Great. So that, I think, is a really game-changing ability to get some substantial LSAT practice and preparation. Whether it will get you all the way to the finish line is something I think you want to assess really carefully. I'm glad Rachel gave the example of the applicant that she talked to who raised his LSAT score by 16 points. I've also had applicants substantially raise their LSAT score. I think it's really important that you know it's possible. It is not common, but this is a learnable test that rewards preparation. Every one of the answers is definably, provably in a court of law. One of the answers is right and the others are wrong. And so when you can break that system, you can figure that out. And it takes work to get there. But that work will pay off in a kind of preparation and thinking when you are in law school. I wish it weren't as important as it is, but getting that score high while you can is worth it. And it's worth it in terms of dollars as well. The next session is going to be all about test prep, so I think that will be really insightful. As far as other ways to save in this application year, you can ask for fee waivers. Here is what my experience with fee waivers has been. Some law schools just are dropping their application fee. Come on in, we come one, come all. Other schools are like, if you ask, if we meet you at a law fair, if we talk to you for a while, if your pre-law advisor asks, right? Like there's some ranges of like, maybe we'll give it to you. Some of them like, if you ask, sure, yeah, but you need to send us a letter. You need to do a little bit of, proving that it really means something to you. Others are like the University of California, Berkeley's like, we don't give them. We give them for Teach for America and Peace Corps, but otherwise we don't give them. So schools run the gamut in whether or not they'll do fee waivers. It's worth asking and worth paying attention to, particularly for those ones where, like, if you're friendly at the law fair, you can save yourself some money, right? These are the areas where you can move a little bit on these pre-law costs. The other thing I would say is, as far as test prep and test taking planning, I would always tell my applicants, pick the LSAT, circle the date that you're going for from your whole application timeline, and then on the calendar, what's the last day to register for that LSAT before you're registering late, and what's the last day to change the date, right? To be like, whoa, I'm not ready. Change the date to a later one without paying a penalty. And then you'll be doing your preparation and your practice testing with those dates in mind. So if you're like, I don't think I'm ready to take it, you won't, squander that chance or take it just because you paid for it or pay a lot more to move that testing. So those are some strategies on the pre-law side of things. Now we're going to talk about law school, the law school costs, and this gets into a little bit, where are you applying to law school? So there are some financial considerations as you think about where you're going to apply to law school. And I think these are, as you think about where you're going to apply, what your list of law schools looks like, trying to get a sense of what the average debt load of the graduating students are. And I would hope you would be above average in every way, except not above average in the debt load, right? I think we want you to be below average in debt. The lifestyle, right? Like, are you living in the most expensive city in the country? Are you living in a remote rural village where you really don't want to be, right? Thinking about the cost of living and will you flourish on that law school campus? Because I do think that that's part of getting value out of this 3 years of your life and all the treasure that you're doing. You want to go to a place where you will flourish because that is going to be part of your end game. And so understanding both the financial and the emotional costs of being at a particular place is going to be important. Personal obligations, right? Rachel gave that example of the student who's had to fly back and forth to take care of his disabled brother, right? Like, you may choose a law school that seems great, but your family, your support network, your friends are somewhere far away. If you find that, if grandma is sick and you have to, be moving to visit her, that's going to be both a financial and a sort of personal cost that's related to that law school, and I think you want to think about that ahead of time. And then scholarship opportunities. I'm about to show you a tool called Analytics, and if any of you came by my table, you might have picked out, there's a promo for Analytics, and our marketing department made it, and it's very mysterious. If you picked it up and were like, I don't really understand what this thing is, I'm about to show you what it is. We built it for admissions people, and so this brochure is kind of not written for people picking a law school, but I hope you'll see why Analytics can be really helpful to you in just a moment. As you are looking at your law schools, there's a lot of things that might attract you to a law school, right? Rachel was talking about the 500 courses at Georgetown and the curriculum and the clinics and all that stuff, but I urge you to include some numbers, some financial pieces in making the list of law schools. And we'll talk a little bit more about what you can know ahead of time and what you really can't know ahead of time. But these are some of the pieces. And then there's other considerations. I don't know why this is a little bit slow, but it's really important if you're going to get the value. You want Academic fit, you want to go to a place where you will flourish and you will be supported academically. You want to think about what's going to make your family life good and supportive, because you want to, again, you want to be doing your best. Geography is really important, both for the experience you have while you are there, but also because job placement-wise, networking-wise, most people in most law schools, even this one, right, even the most elite law schools, take the bar in the state where their law school is, or very near it, right, 1 or 2 states away, which means your classmates, your professors' friends, the visiting attorneys who you meet at cocktail parties will be localized in the place where you spend those 3 years of law school. All of your boosters, right, like that network will be most concentrated in the place you go to law school. And although some law schools have a more national reach and some a more regional reach, you will, I think it is wise for you to think not just where you want to spend those 3 years, but where you want your professional life to be based, right? And will that law school get you there? Will it get you there affordably? And the bar passage rate, I mean, that's not, I think that's kind of that's more of a warning sign if the bar passage rate is quite low. I think it is worth researching. Bar passages are all statewide, right? California has a notoriously low bar passage rate, right? Massachusetts is known as Passachusetts, right? So its bar passage rate is a little higher. So you want to evaluate the statistics about law schools in the context of, you know, how the overall bar passage rate is. But if it is too low, you really want to be cautious, because you want to make sure you're going to get the value of your law degree. I'm going to do a quick demo of this analytics tool because I think it is a great way to research law schools, and it is, I think, even more useful as a clarifier for yourself. Every time I do it, it prompts me to think about new questions, right, about what might matter for different people in law, in choosing a law school. So you can find analytics on our website. You can come and take out one of these handouts a little later on. You want the side-by-side comparison. And what you can do is you can choose up to 5 schools. You can see that okay? Because we're here in Boston, I figured I'd pick some, Massachusetts schools to compare. So you can choose up to 5, and the way we get this data is every law school in the country is required by the American Bar Association to publish information about its law school, a bunch of stats that are verifiable and that can be compared to other law schools. They get published in something called a 509 report. You can find each individual law school's 509 reports, but they're sort of boring and hard to read, right, when you look at them. What we've done is we've taken the data from those 509 reports, and we've made it possible to choose things that matter to you. So what you can do is, here's an example. I wanted to choose what are the tuition and fees, right? There are a lot of things you might want to compare about law schools, and I think you might find yourself losing a little time diving into analytics and trying to compare different things. But I'm going to focus on the money, the economic stuff, right? So what's the tuition, right? That's a useful number to know. I also selected what's the percentage of students at this law school who get half to full tuition scholarships? How generous are they at giving out scholarships? Seems useful to know, right? And then what percentage of students get employment, full-time, long-term jobs when they graduate, within 10 months of graduation? Seems important to know, right? And the jobs aren't necessarily the same jobs, but if there's low employment, you're gonna ask some questions. And what about the bar passage rate? So what I think is interesting, I'm comparing some schools that are pretty different. I don't know that any one bar graph is surprising, but for me, I always start to go like, oh, that school's double the price of that school. Is it twice as good in its outcomes, right? And so you start kind of asking. So I'm gonna let you move through, see if you're surprised by any of these numbers, right? Oh, This isn't the one that has Harvard on it. I'm sorry. So here we go. I have some other law schools. Rats. You can probably imagine Harvard is the most expensive. Yes?
On the slide before this one,
Yep.
it's not like a particular website or tool. I know you said that.
Yeah, it's called Analytics.
Okay, analytics.
Yeah, and I can show you where to find it later. So, so you can compare the tuition and living expenses. Then you can compare grants and scholarships, right? So this gets sort of interesting, right? The more expensive schools are not necessarily the most generous in giving out scholarships. So what I think is useful about this tool is it really unpacks some assumptions you might have and I think it's going to challenge you to go, what do I really value most? What is worth what to me, right? Like what, if there's a difference, how much is that difference worth in outcome? And I don't know what the answer is for you, but I think it's important that you know the answer for you. And I think this will let you ask some of those questions. So percentage, right? So percentage of employment of grads by employment. Now I have one with Harvard on it. I'm sorry. I didn't get these slides quite right. So you'll see different employment outcomes. It won't surprise anyone that Harvard does well in employment. And then bar passage. What I think is interesting here is UMass Dartmouth, right? Not super expensive, but is outpacing some of its more expensive counterparts in bar passage. That's interesting, that's worth knowing. It might be worth a look. I don't know that any of these things are going to be definitive for you, but I think if you pick your law school without doing this kind of research and homework and comparison shopping, you're missing an opportunity to be thoughtful and specific and strategic about how you're spending your money and your time. So now we're getting away from these specifics. And we're going to look at law school costs. We're going to squarely look at the numbers, and it's not fun, but it is important. This isn't the whole cost. This is 1 year. That's 1 year in 2016 average. This is the average price. Okay, we get this, right? So these are really big numbers. And so you're going to multiply by 3, right, to get your law school cost. But you're going to, how many of us think that tuition stays flat year to year? No, that's not what happens. So every year, tuition goes up a little bit. Plus, the money you borrowed in your first year is accruing some interest while you are borrowing money for your second year and your third year, right? So these are big numbers. And again, I'm bullish on law school. I think it's important. I'm inspired. But I want you to look at this. Like, you could buy a house with this money. And if you were going to buy a house, you would get it inspected, right? You would talk to a loan officer. You would be very thoughtful about the investment you were making. And just having been told by so many law students and young attorneys, I wish I'd thought this through a little more. They weren't regretting it, but they were just like, oh. And one of the reasons I am still paying for my law school is in my second year of law school, I worked. I earned a bunch of money, and in the summer after my second year of law school, I worked at one of those big firms, and I earned a lot of money. And then I kind of like cruised into my third year, and I was like, I think I want to take it easy. And I just borrowed money. It was stupid. I mean, I'm fine. Don't cry for me. But like, I just wish I'd been a little more thoughtful about what that decision would mean a long time later. And so I hope you'll be smarter than I am. So we're not done. We're going to talk about the money it's going to cost you before you're working as a lawyer, right? So if you go to a traditional law program, you will get out of law school, go cross the stage, everyone will be weeping and cheering you on, you will be wearing a funny hood, you'll get your diploma. It will be the end of May, middle of May, and then you will take a bar exam in the end of July. And our data show strongly, and many people will say, you do not want to be doing anything else but studying for the bar or feeling guilty about not being studying for the bar, right, during that period of time till the end of July, right? But presumably, you will need to pay rent and you will need to buy groceries. And if you have a car, you will need to pay insurance and put gas in it. So you will need to be spending money, and you may not, and the bar itself is expensive, the prep time, but just the living costs, right? So there's a period of time where you won't yet be getting a return on your law school investment. If you are one of the people who's getting into a law firm job, you're going to take the bar at the end of July, you're going to take a few days off and relax, and then your law firm might say, great, come on in on middle of August or early September, and you're off to work. But if you are one of the other kinds of attorneys who work at a government agency or for a nonprofit, public service kind of job, they are not allowed to hire you until you have passed the bar. So you will have to wait for your bar results to be in. You can work, but you may not be able to work and be paid as an attorney until you are admitted to the bar. That's in about October. So this is important in your planning. It's a bummer, but the bigger bummer would be if you didn't know it was coming and you didn't plan for it. What I think is useful to know is those law school costs are financeable, right, through financial aid. But studying for the bar, you're no longer a student, so there's not federal student loans available for that bar thing. Some law schools incorporate bar study into their third year. And so that is something you can get, that will be part of your tuition payments, right? So you'll want to scrutinize that, or at least start making a plan for the costs associated with the bar exam. If your plan for going to law school includes taking a bar and becoming an attorney, which most people who go to law school intend to do, you just want to plan for it. Okay, are we happy and excited by this? Yeah, all right. So now we're going to talk about earnings. What can you earn on the other side? And this is where I think it gets interesting, and I'm going to point you to a couple resources that I think are worth knowing about. And I think it's important if law is a way for you to improve your socioeconomic condition, right? If the money is the financial outcomes is important to you, you really want to run the numbers and you really want to understand the employment and those outcomes. And that is something that I think you need to get geographically and industry specific about, because the averages are not predictive of the specific kinds of industries that you're into. And if your goal is public service, right, if you're mission driven, again, you need to pay attention to the numbers, because the numbers aren't just going to work out for themselves. You got to have your eye on that and have a plan when the debt loads are this big, right? There is a way to the other side, but it's going to be different from the person sitting beside you. It's going to be personal to you. So I want to share the resources that can make you more informed about that. So here's the salary info. There's an organization called NALP, the National Association of Law Placement. They are a nonprofit and they do surveys about law careers. They are figuring out how many years it takes to go from associate to partner at big firms. They are looking at who becomes corporate counsel. They are looking at what the salary of public defenders or of prosecutors are. They publish all this stuff. One of the things they have been doing for years and years that law schools are required to comply with, they survey people 10 months out. Do you have a job? What kind of job do you have? How much does your job pay? So they've been gathering this data. You might notice things got bad in 2008 and 2009. Things are climbing back a little bit, but it's slow going. And you'll see there's two rows here. There's the overall median. Everyone who's their first year out of law school who answered those surveys, including people who don't have jobs, who have jobs at Starbucks, who have jobs at their law school admissions office, who have jobs in the federal government, right? Any job, that's the overall median. And then there's the law firm median, right? And we remember from way back when that median is half of the salaries are below this and half of the salaries are above this, right? So it's not the same as mean, but, and you can break that down and get a little more specific if you know what you're interested in, right? What percentage of people are doing each of these things, right, in that survey? 53% of lawyers were in private practice. Half of them had salaries below 104 and half above 104,000, right? Then there was business, all kinds of things encompassed in there, government, judicial clerk, public interest. I'm going to show you something else that I think is interesting. How many of you guys ever took stats or econ? I'm going to sort of, and maybe people who become lawyers don't do it because they love numbers and stats. So I hope I'm not taking you to an uncomfortable place. But if you were imagining a sample of lawyer salaries and how that distribution would be, you would probably imagine a bell curve, right? Most people have a salary around here. A few people on either side have higher and lower, but it's going to look like a bell curve. I promise you something weird is going on in law schools, in lawyer salaries, because this is what the sample of law school salaries looks like. And this is from 2014, but I've been going every year and hearing the executive director give the speech and reveal the law salaries. I've seen it in 2015, 2016. I don't think the class of 2017, the class of 2017 is out, right? Every year it looks like this. The numbers change, but the pattern does not. So this is really weird, right? Here's what's going on with this number, but I want to suggest that you could productively spend some time looking at the NALP website. And if, depending on where your future lies, I would encourage you to do some regional research. Here's what's going on. The bell curve exists, but these days that bell curve it's moved over a little bit. It's more like 70 to 80, right, is the bell curve. Most lawyers are in that group. But there is a subset of lawyers, and then there's nobody really in between. These numbers and the valley of death, right, down low, is like 2% of people earning salaries around here, right? Almost no one is earning those salaries. And then there's a spike, right? 16% of first-year lawyers. They are the ones who are, walking through that marble foyer, getting on the hushed elevators, up to the 71st floor, going into the conference room for the merger that's going to be in the Wall Street Journal the next day, right? Those law firms hire, and they are lockstep. Those law firms have one salary, and what actually you can find out, I'm not exactly accurate, this summer, a couple of law firms jumped from $180,000 to $190,000, and then a bunch of others are like, us too, right? So some of them are still at 180, and some of them jumped to 190, but basically, there's not a lot of variation. You're either at one of those firms, and you can probably imagine, and if you're there, hooray, your loans are going to be no problem, right? So, but if that is your goal and if that is your plan, you need to figure out what those firms are, and you can imagine they're in New York, DC, Chicago, LA, Miami, Atlanta, but they're not in Denver. They're not in Cincinnati, right? So actually there's some regional variation. Those, Cincinnati has tall buildings, you can go, nice elevators, maybe you're not going to the 71st floor, maybe you're going to the 19th floor, but they are not in that spike zone, right? So if that is your plan, you are geographically limited. There are certain firms that hire, and you need to know, are they recruiting from your law school, and what is it going to take to get me there? Because it doesn't just happen, and there's a big variation. So NALP, I wish they didn't, but NALP, NALP summarizes its reports. You can find a lot by Googling and crawling around on their website, but they have more detailed reports and they charge for them. It makes me crazy. Law school career services offices subscribe to those reports. And if your intent is to work in the Southeast or the Southwest, you're going to want to understand what the hiring market and the salaries and the recruiting world is in the region where you intend to practice, so that you have a sense of what's waiting on the other side and what your plan is to get there. Helpful? Okay. Now we're going to talk about the how of paying for law school. All right, so there's some important stuff you need to know, and the first thing I'm going to start with is a term. It's called the cost of attendance. And you would think this would mean, what does it cost to attend law school? And it kind of does, but it's a financial aid specialized term, right? And so I think it's really important for me to tell you that you're going to see the cost of attendance, and it is a very specific number that includes two kinds of costs, right? Every law school must publish this cost of attendance number for their own law school. And if you are going to borrow money for law school, like most people do, what's going to happen is you'll get approved for a loan. The law school will process your forms and information, and we'll talk about the how. The money will get dispersed from the Department of Ed, the federal government, and the law school will be, thanks, we're keeping this stuff, the direct costs, right? So that tuition, books, and supplies, they're great. You never see that. You don't get to decide, here's your money, I'm not going to pay it, I'm paying it late. They decide and they keep it. And then there's the living cost, the living expenses, right? So you'll get something called a refund, but that's dispersed to you, and that's what you're going to use to buy groceries and to pay your rent and to, take care of the expenses that you need as a person who needs to stay alive, right? There are a couple things. The cost of attendance doesn't mean what you will actually pay, right? The living expenses side, the law school makes an estimate, but that doesn't mean it's what you're gonna pay. Your real cost of attendance might be more or it might be less. My strong suggestion is to find a way for it to be less. And this is where those people with more life experience and more of a sense of what does it really cost me? Where am I gonna live? How much money do I spend on food? You'll be able to evaluate the law school's cost of attendance with a grain of salt, right? And so you don't need to borrow the full cost of attendance. If you need to pay them what they're going to take, and we'll talk about that. I mean, what Rachel said, and this is the world of law school, most financial help you'll get from law school comes in the form of merit scholarships, which are often keyed to your academic predictors, the LSAT and GPA, and how those figure into the rest of the class. So that's going to reduce some of those direct costs that, those will show up as grants or discounts on your tuition and fees. And then the living expenses is what you have control over by where you choose to live and how you choose to, feed yourself and make those decisions. So I think it's important to know that use the cost of attendance as an estimate, the published cost of attendance, but you won't know what it will cost you to attend a particular law school until you apply and get their financial aid offer, right? So this is why that analytics, like getting a sense how many people are getting scholarships, what kinds of scholarships are they getting, right? It will help you make some decisions if money is going to cross a school off or put it on your application list, right? Because that published sticker price of tuition isn't necessarily that predictive of what they'll offer you. Okay, so how do you pay? Well, you just go to the bank and take the $67,000 that you have in there, right, for your first year. Most of us can't do that, right? So there's 4 ways people pay for law school. There's personal resources. There's what you have, right? Like what you have in your bank account, checking account, savings account, what you can sell, right? Most people, that's not very much, and usually that gets, stays in your bank to pay for, the living expenses side of things. There's grants and scholarships, bingo. This is the thing we really want to talk the most about, and this is where will distinguish between merit aid scholarships and need-based scholarships. And there's money that you earn while you're in law school. If you worked in undergrad and were part of federal work study, I'm sorry to tell you, this is not really a thing in law school, right? And unless you are going in a part-time program where your law school is built to have you working jobs, you will be discouraged from taking part-time work in your first year of law school. This is discouraging, but it's really intense. And remember, you want to get the value out of law school of what you're going there for. You need to flourish academically. Law school is hard, and the first year is really hard. You are going to feel, perplexed and confused and lost and behind. I think it is true of every law student feels that way. And you don't want to hurt your chance of flourishing academically and getting to do the work that you're going there to do by, taking too many shifts. So occasional work during, occasional babysitting gig or a bartending shift now and then, or some graphic design side work, whatever. A little of that may keep you sane, but that's not gonna make a huge dent in your law school tuition. And then the way most people pay, the way most financial aid works, is you borrow, right? So you get to go right now, even if you don't have the money in the bank. It is possible for you to obtain the money you need to go now, and then you're gonna pay it back over time, right? So how does that work? Well, what you're gonna do is you're gonna be, figuring out, here's my strong suggestion. Rachel talked to you about the importance of timing, applying early in the cycle with as strong an application as you can. That is good both for getting in and for getting merit scholarships, right? The law school admissions people, not only do they have more seats available in the theater, but to the extent they have a bundle of money that they're gonna offer people to sweeten the pot, to make it more likely and easier for you to come to their law school once they've decided they want you, that pot of money, right? If I promise it to you because you applied in October, I have to let you, I can't take it back and offer it to her when she applies in November, right? Like, I've given that away, and I need to wait and see if you're gonna come to my law school or not, right? Or if you're gonna ask for a reconsideration and ask me for more money, right? And so they start giving out that money, promising it to sweeten the pot, and by the end of the cycle, there's less to play with. Now, weirdly, there becomes more money to play with at the end of the cycle because she might say, yeah, thanks, I'm going to a different law school. And that money comes back to me, and that's when these reconsideration and waitlist conversations, I can be like, oh, great, because I can offer a little more to her, right? So that's where, it gets nuanced, and I'm hoping you have a pre-law advisor or you have Access Connects, Rachel and me and our team, to help you sort of think through and understand that process. But first is you're going to do a strong application for admission. Second, you're going to get on the FAFSA, right? And you're going to apply through the free application for federal student aid. Because you are going to a graduate program, will be considered independent, so you will not need family information. It will just be your information. That's a pretty quick application, right? You should be able to do it over lunch. That is really going to determine your eligibility for the loans. And then each law school may have need-based or merit-based or a combination of need and merit-based institutional aid. And they'll have their own sets of hoops to jump through. So I just told you that for the FAFSA, you don't need family information. School like Harvard, they're gonna wanna know if you're a person, even though you're independent, are you the person whose parents gave them a BMW on your 16th birthday? Or are you the person who's been working to pay your own way, right? Like, to Harvard, those things look different, and if they're gonna give some of their institutional money to help you out, they wanna know as much about your full circumstance as possible. So schools will have different rules about how to apply for the institutional aid that they have that is need-based instead of merit-based. But mostly need means, great, we'll handle and process your federal loan applications. Yeah?
So all law students are considered independent?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So student loans, here's what your options are going to be. There's federal direct unsubsidized loan, not a great interest rate, but the best that there is, and not a great fee, but the better than the alternative. You can only get $20,500 a year. So for most people, you're going to need to borrow more than you can get through the federal direct program. There's the Grad Plus, still Department of Education, still a federal loan, but a little bit of a higher interest rate and a higher fee. And then there's private loans, which come from banks, right, and which are a private deal. You may or may not qualify for these because it depends on your credit, right? If JP Morgan is deciding to loan you money, they're gonna ask for different things, and they're gonna maybe give it to you and maybe not, and what your interest rate is gonna depend on the people at JP Morgan, right? So what I find hard to recommend and worth a larger conversation is right now, some of the private loans have more attractive interest rates than the federal loans. It's worth paying attention to that, but with all the uncertainty of what you have to pay back on the other side, the federal loans have a lot of protections negotiated by Congress to protect borrowers about options to repay. And I think until you are settled in that $190,000 a year job, I would not give away the protections of those federal loan repayment options and the flexibility that come with those. I would not negotiate that away lightly. So there's a lot of dorky, conversations and strategies we can have about what kind of loans, but I would say we're available to you to help and support you making those decisions down the line when it's time to make them. All right, I want to be quick because you have other fish to fry tonight. So big average amount borrowed. Oof. Right? This is yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. So here's some stuff you need to know, right? We have a calculator on our website, right? AccessLex calculator, right? You can find it, and I have some handouts about it. You can figure out what you might owe. It's going to use cost of attendance numbers. Now, that isn't going to be your cost, but you can play with that. And you can actually plug in jobs you might get, salaries you might get. And you can see the income-driven repayment plan versus the debt-driven repayment plan. So there are options to repay your debt the way we all imagine, which is you take the entire amount you owe and chop it into little even pieces and pay it down over 10 years or over 25 years, right? Longer amount, more interest, but more manageable payments. But there's another method, which is to be promising to pay a portion of your income, right, toward your loans for a specific amount of time. And if you do that, every year you have to tell what your Congress or your lender what you're making, right? And then every year they'll tell you this is what your portion of your income you're paying toward your loans. It'll be 10, 15, or 20, depending which of the plans you're in. And you do that for a certain number of years. And even if you don't finish paying off the loans after a certain amount of time, 25 years, the balance of your loan will be forgiven. That is available. There is a better version of that, which is called public service loan forgiveness, where you're paying a portion of your income and you're doing it for 10 years. And at the end, those loans are erased. So there is a way to have big debt and a low salary and to live, right? Not be crippled by it. But it's complicated and it's important, and you want to choose it with your eyes wide open so you understand what the math is. Yeah?
How does that affect
Your
your purchasing power?
purchasing power?
With other transactions?
Well, I think, are you talking about your credit score maybe?
Yeah, or even your debt to income.
Yeah, your debt to income is complicated, right? And I think there's one, the total debt, but there's also the monthly debt payments, and I don't know which is calculated into it. But basically, if you are complying, your credit will be on your credit score, that loan will be seen as in payment, right? Like it will not be in default. But yes, debt to income ratio, that's a complicated one, and I'm not quite sure how it's treated because some of those ratios are about the monthly payment and some are about the total debt. Right. So, yeah.
I know law students borrow extra money to help take care of themselves, like as far as living expenses and just help take care of their daily living.
Yeah.
How do you know how much extra money you need to borrow to help take care of this?
Well, that's what we were talking about. So every law school publishes that cost of attendance, and they have that estimated living expenses. And so that is where I think you want to look at the estimated living expenses. They're going to tell you, like, all right, you're moving to Pittsburgh. This is what it costs to live in Pittsburgh, right? So, but what's funny about that is Pittsburgh is a good example. University of Pitt School of Law and Duquesne School of Law, same town, different cost of living, right? So these schools just have different numbers in there. That's because, like, it's not because those people are living in different kinds of like they're living in the same town, right? So that cost of living is where, life experience plus good estimates plus talking to law students, right? I would be doing your homework. So here's what you need to know. You don't need to borrow as much as they tell you. You cannot borrow more than what they say the cost of attendance is for the law school, unless you say, I got kids. This is what it costs me. They will calculate for you a particular different specific cost of attendance for you if you have specific things that make your life more complicated and therefore more expensive. You can get approved, but you want to do that wisely. So you can't say, like, I just feel like having a nice apartment, right? So give me more money, right? There's a cost of attendance. That's your cap on what you can borrow. But my advice is try to borrow less. But if you're eligible for more, you can go back to the financial aid office and be like, I need a little more. You can borrow up to that cap, right? But you don't have to take that cap just because they calculated it for you. All right, so there's a few more things, and I'm going to move quickly through them, but to say, look, you're going to get financial aid offers, right? Once you're in, you're going to start getting financial aid offers. And this is where I want to say, we've got your back. You've got these smart people you can talk on the phone who like math and can sort of debrief this stuff with you. But what I think is important is you're going to be comparing the same components. Your financial aid offers are going to look different. And what I think is important, if you looked at analytics at those different prices, some schools with a high price tag give high grants, right, and scholarships. I would sometimes have students be like, these guys gave me $25,000 in scholarships, and these guys only gave me $10,000 in scholarships. That doesn't seem right. And you're inclined to follow the one with the higher scholarship number. But you need to do the math, right? The school that gave you the $10,000 scholarship may still cost you less than the $25,000 scholarship because of what their bottom line prices are. So you really want to be comparing each component and understanding what are you responsible for, because that is the bottom line number. And if you are going to do a request for reconsideration, what will help you sound sincere and thoughtful and responsible and the kind of person they want to help is if you have done the math and been very thoughtful about why you're asking and how it works, right? You're not just like, hey, you should match them because I want more money, right? Like that reads as insincere and isn't calculated to let the admissions person feel great about, like, I only have this much money and I need to build my class. Like, I want to give it to people who are really need it and to come, right? Okay, so we are mostly through. There are ways to compare costs. Here's the stuff I want to suggest that you do next. I want to say we have analytics. I think it's fun and worth spending a little time playing around with. We have a calculator, and this is kind of a bummer, but it is worth spending a little time trying to assess what these numbers might be. Particularly, throw some salary numbers in, right? Because, look at those NALP numbers, think about where you might end up, and then you might see what your income-driven repayment options are as well as the debt-driven repayment options. There is such a thing as public service loan forgiveness. We periodically do webinars about public service loan forgiveness. There's a lot in the press about public service loan forgiveness right now. It's kind of scary sounding. We're watching it very closely and we're lobbying Congress. But right now, with the House, the recent elections, we think public service loan forgiveness is safe for the time being, which is a great thing. It's a really great benefit. Yeah. Some law schools also have loan repayment assistance programs where if you take a low paying job, particularly if it's a public interest job, the law school will pay a portion of your loans for you. This is really interesting. They exist at many programs, but they're obviously differently funded. Harvard's is really well funded, Yale's is really well funded, Columbia's is very well funded, so that they will subsidize your loan payments while you are taking a lower paying job. This is a really interesting and important benefit, and before you rule out those expensive law schools, you want to understand how the loan repayment assistance program might work and really dive into those details. Yeah?
How long is it working in public?
Depends on the school. So some schools, Yale, you don't have to be doing public interest. You could be writing a book. You're just not earning very much money. Great, Yale will pay it, right? It's about a sliding scale. You do whatever you want, and if you're not earning much, they'll pay it for you. Most schools are not able to do that, right? And so they have some rules to make it fair and to encourage the kind of service that they think is important and that most of their students are taking low-paying salaries to do. So it really depends.
The reason I was part two of
Yeah.
my question is I was asking how long, in terms of as soon as you start a higher paying job, do you now go up to a higher rate of payment?
Depends on the program. Sometimes they might, if you're doing like, we have, sorry, I'm gonna, our webinar also includes something called Road to Zero. We give this talk around the country to lawyers, law students, right? 3 Ls, about you're about to repay your loans. What are your options? How does it work? It gets really technical, but it's wonderful. It really runs through scenarios. Like say I take a public interest job, 3 years later, Elon Musk calls you, says, I wanted you to be the lawyer for Mars, right? I'm gonna pay you $1 million a year. You're like, okay, but what does that do to my student loans? We walk you through all these scenarios. And then then you get married and your spouse's income is this. So there's a bunch of that stuff. It's super nerdy, I'm sorry, it's really, but if you get interested, I think, I applaud your interest in understanding the details, right? Because you wanna understand how this thing works. All right, so I am going to just tell you we've got your back. We're here, and I hope you'll take advantage of this. I salute you for your ambition. I hope you get everything out of law school that you came to get, and if there's anything I can do personally or AccessLex can do to help you on your way, we want to. With that, I'm going to end and go outside to answer questions.